She lost her place today, so Amanda lost her
John,
Yes, sir.
it's a great article back there.
Thank you.
Y'all see it? Back of the bulletin.
I appreciate y'all having patience with me. Y'all can read that article for a second. If you want to. Good to see Ryan and Melanie. How are y'all?
Good.
Good. How's Arkansas?
Good.
Good. All right. So now that I got my ducks in a row, I think, look, I'm not going to claim I got anything in a row. Not this morning. It was one of those days.
ducks do fly.
Yeah, ducks do fly. Yeah. It's good to see everybody. We're studying lesson 10 of The Devil, Sin, and Hell with the curriculum Engraving Heavenly Truths. And so we're discussing and defining different sins here lately. And that's what we're going to be doing for the duration of this class as well. We've got a few more of those to define. So my computer, it's not. Okay, let me see if I can.
Keep coming.
This would be the morning, wouldn't it? There we go. I don't know what happened, but I did something right. All right. The sin of being implicable. Have you ever heard that word? Implicable. You're just implicable. That's just the unwillingness to reconcile. It's the highest degree of an unforgiving spirit. Now, when I was studying and I was talking about this, it gives the example there of the older brother from the account of the prodigal son. The prodigal son came home, and the older brother begins to get angry when he hears about what's going on. He goes to his father. It says he didn't even go. Matter of fact, it says that his father came to him because he wouldn't even go to his father. He mentions, he says, out of everything I've done for you, I've stayed faithful to you for all these years. And you don't so much as give me a goat, but you give him a fatted calf. You don't so much as give me a kid, is how the King James puts it. You haven't even given me a kid, a goat. But yet you give him, he comes home and you give him the fatted calf. And I thought about that and I said, you know what? I'm going to hang my hat right there for just a minute. A lot of times that unwillingness to forgive is kind of brought on by jealousy. You see the jealousy there in his remark. He's upset, he's angered by the fact that his brother gets this celebration when he comes home after not being faithful to his father, not being there for his father all those years. And then, so you see it, and I think when I want to word this right. When we look at it, that jealousy causes anger. The anger causes unwillingness to forgive. Do you see the chain of events that took place there? Let's go to that account if you want to. We'll read it, Luke 15. And if you're there, you can begin reading in verse 25 if you want to. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he comes home from working, and he hears all of this celebrating going on. Says he called one of his servants and asked what these things meant. So what's going on here? And he said, your brother's come, and the father has killed the fatted calf because he's received him safe and sound. And so this angered the brother. It says he was angry and would not go in. Therefore came his father out and entreated him. And he answered, said to his father, lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandments. I didn't do anything against you. I've kept your word. I've done everything you asked me to do all these years, and yet you never even gave me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as your son was come, notice he didn't say my brother. Notice that? Your son. I do that. Heather does that. When we're angry with the kids, your kid, and yeah, when you're angry and you're in that moment, it's like some kind of like a mental block. You're just like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm angry. I'm upset. They've pushed me to that limit. It says, your son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, has killed him for the fatted calf. Thou hast killed him for the fatted calf. And so he's saying, killed for him. I'm sorry, I just read that wrong. And he said unto him, son, thou art with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is now found. He celebrated, the father celebrating, and everyone else in the situation is celebrating. You hear the music, he comes home to hear the music and the dancing. The one person that was upset was his brother. This unwillingness to forgive. He carried that unwillingness to even reconcile, to make things right. And so, we see that attitude, and a lot of times, let's talk about that in realms of the church. Say somebody, I don't know if it's ever happened here, but somebody was wayward for a while and they come home and they're reconciled to God, but then the church family has a hard time accepting them back in. Some of the church family might have a hard time forgiving the things that they have done. And that's brought on by lots of different things. That's brought on by probably thoughts of whether or not the person is sincere. But that's not up to us, is it? It's not up to us to be that judge as to whether or not they were sincere. When they come home and they're reconciled to God, we should also be reconciled to them as well.
If we can't forgive our brother here, no matter what they do.
Yeah.
If they ask for penance and God can forgive them, then we need to forgive them, or we won't be forgiven of our sins.
You said it perfectly. When we get to heaven, if we have unforgiveness in our heart, how can we expect God to forgive us of the things that we've done that trespassed him, that went against what he asked? How can we expect that? And it goes along also with just being a person of character. If that person asks for forgiveness, again, it's not up to us to measure whether or not they're sincere. If they ask for forgiveness, it's up to us to give it to them. And it's like Mr. Huey said, it's better for us to forgive than to keep holding that resentment toward individuals, because it's going to do nothing but destroy us. It's going to do nothing but break us down. And that's part of it. What did Christ say when he was on the cross?
Father, forgive them, they know not what they do.
And the more you think about that, the more you realize these folks, now I understand that the people that were there, they were ignorant to what they were doing. I get it. I understand that they were ignorant. They had no idea what was going on. But see, we see the Savior petitioning for their forgiveness when they didn't deserve it. Sometimes we just need to forgive them. We need to love them through it. And if they ask for it, especially if they ask for it, if they come back like this in this instance here, he comes back and he's joined again to his father. There should have been no reason why the brother could not have said, okay, I forgive you. Let's celebrate. Let's welcome you home. But that resentment and unwillingness to forgive, he was probably jealous or angry. You think about the way that life was in those times. The children stayed around to help the fathers with all of the responsibilities and the things that they had built together, this empire, that they're building together as a family unit. And so that they work together to provide for one another. And so this brother goes off and he's out sleeping around and doing things that are not right and just becoming an absolute embarrassment to the family, while the other brother's at home angry because he's having to, somebody had to take up his load, didn't they? So I can imagine, I can put myself in the position of this brother. I can see the anger and where the anger might come from. But as a Christian, Jesus says for us to forgive them. And regardless, if they come back, especially if they come back, let them know, that you don't hold it against them. Let's talk about the sin of being unmerciful. Unmerciful just means simply not having compassion. That's what I put there. If we go to Exodus 5. Beginning at verse 10, we're going to read down through 14. Go you get your straw where you can find it, yet not all of your work shall be diminished. So the people were scattered abroad throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble instead of straw. And the taskmasters hasted them. Fulfill your works, your daily task, as when there was straw. And the officers of the children of Israel, which Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over, were beaten and demanded, wherefore have you fulfilled your task in making brick both yesterday and today? Unmerciful. Just absolutely not having compassion. I don't care what your problem is. I don't care what's going on. You do what you're supposed to do. You get it done. Not having any mercy whatsoever on their circumstance. Not having any compassion. Looking at Matthew 18. And I'll stop right here before we go on to Matthew 18, and I'll just talk about the fact that, again, I bring up my kids a lot because they have taught me a lot. But a lot of times, Heather will kind of bring me back down to reality. She'll be like, wait a minute now. You're being a little too harsh, being a little too tough. think about what you're doing here. And a lot of times I realize after I think about it for a minute, I'm angry at the moment. But when I think about it for a second, I'm like, yeah, I probably could have been a little more merciful. I probably could have shown a little more compassion. Carson will mess up sometime, and I'm telling on myself right now. I'm telling on myself. And when he messes up and he tries to do better and it doesn't quite meet my standard of right, I'm still angry. And so what do? I lash out. That's when Heather goes, wait a minute. And I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for Mama to be there, because sometimes I don't see it. Sometimes I don't see how tough I want my babies to grow up better than I did. I do. I want my kids to grow up and have more and not make the same stupid mistakes that I did. And so I am tough on them, and I'm hard. Heather jokingly calls me the drill sergeant when she's talking to my mom about it. And, I expect, but we can have mercy too. God has mercy upon us when we don't quite make the mark, doesn't he? He shares compassion and love on us when we can't quite do it right, when all falls short of the glory of God. There's still mercy and compassion that's shared there. Let's look at the parable of the unforgiven servant, though. Let's read verses 22 and beginning there. Jesus said unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. That's again talking about how many times should I forgive them. Then he gives the parable of the unforgiven servant. Therefore is the kingdom of heaven likened unto a certain king, which would take account of his servants. And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. But for so much as he had not paid, his Lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. The servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. Then the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion, and loosed him and forgave him that debt. But the same servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 pence, and he said, and he had laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, pay me that thou owest. You see here, he was forgiven. He was forgiven a large debt, but did not forgive those who were indebted to him. God's forgiven us of all the wrong that we have done. When we are washed in his blood, that's what that washing does, is it takes away every mark that was ever against us, everything that has ever been done. And then when if we go wayward and then we come back and we're restored, that same situation takes place on a spiritual note. We're prayed for. We're welcomed back into those sins that held us wayward, that kept us wayward. They're now forgiven. Those sins are no more when we come back to the fold. Yet, sometimes it's hard for us to look at that. We're thankful for it when it comes to us. But like I said, as the church family, when we look at others, and we're quick to judge whether or not the person that is being restored is sincere, whether or not the person that's being restored is, of the right mindset. And I understand that there are some people who will talk about, well, I know I need to get back over there. I know I need to start doing right. I know I need to get my life where it needs to go. And I have this understanding that I'm not where I need to be. And they talk a big talk to the church family, but when it comes to action, you don't see it. I get that. I get that. And so a lot of times we think about those people in the back of our mind when somebody truly comes forward sincere to be restored. We should always open our arms and accept them in and love them if they come up to especially be restored or to be forgiven and make a statement that they want to be better and do right. Always having that attitude of forgiveness. Let's talk about the sin of having pleasure in others' sin. Now this one's, like I said, it's kind of worded funny. You enjoy others disobeying God. enjoying others disobeying God. I've got two examples here, the Corinthians and then Paul at Stephen's stoning. You look at Paul and you can see there he signed, he's pretty much one of the ones that signed off on it. He was the one that gave the go-ahead for Stephen, a Christian who was following after God, to be stoned. And so it gave him joy. It gave him pleasure to know that this Christian, but this is before. So let me go ahead and say this. This was Saul that did this before he was Paul, before he had the encounter with God, with Jesus on the road to Damascus. Before he was changed and his mind was changed, he had pleasure and took pleasure in those, in the wrongful actions being done to Christians, bad things taking place. What are some other ways? And well, you've got the Corinthians here in 1 Corinthians 5. Remember, this was the perverted stepson who was having relations with his stepmother. And so Paul tells him, deliver such a one to Satan. He says, you guys y'all are entertaining this. You should not entertain it. You should separate yourselves from it. 1 Corinthians 5 and verse 2 says, you're puffed up and have not rather mourned. You're not even upset about the fact that he's doing this, that he hath done this deed, that he that hath done this deed might be taken away from among you. Separate yourselves from wickedness. Separate yourselves from that. Don't entertain wrongdoing. What are some examples of how we have pleasure in others' sins?
Condoning their sins.
Yeah. Condoning their sins. Saying, well, I understand. I know. Folks will try to justify their wrongdoing. And if we shake our head and just to kind of, well, I understand. I know. I remember this fella long time ago, but I was young and I was impressionable. And back then, and I'm not saying I don't think this is necessarily a sin. I don't think it's good for us, but I don't know if it's necessarily a sin. I can't put my finger on it necessarily, but tobacco, when people use tobacco, I can't just outright say, it's not okay.
John,
Yes, sir.
one thing that damages your body, which is the Holy Spirit. So
True.
I think death to tobacco is a sin.
Okay.
That's my thoughts.
And, but if you go that far, you have to say, well, eating the extra cupcake would be too.
Well, that is a sin.
Yeah.
Liquor is a sin.
Yeah. I think I agree. And I'm not making light of it. But this fella was he was a preacher, and he had the habit of dipping tobacco. And me and him got to talking, and he said, well, everybody's got to have a vice. And when he said that, I understand. Look, I get it that people make light of tobacco. I have been, thank goodness, 4 years, since 2017, I haven't touched it. And I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful that I don't have to worry about that being, I was pretty much a slave to it. I mean, I was addicted. That's just all there is to it. And, but yeah, I was talking about this guy, and that's what he said. He said, everybody's got to have a vice. And immediately I just saw the error in his remark. Our vice should be Christ. The one that we cling to, the one that we hold on to, that should be the Lord, not this substance. And like I said, what Huey said, when we do something that's against our body, what God's told us to take care of and do the best with, then we're definitely not where we need to be. So we need to think about that. But when we just, like I said, if I would have remarked to that like it was all okay when this fella said that, I would have been condoning his addiction. That's something that's got him in bondage. It really does. I mean, I've been a tobacco addict. I've been one who has been addicted, and I know However, morning before you as soon as you wake up, that's what you're thinking about. And every time after you eat, that's what you want to do. I know I've been in bondage to it. And so for me to condone this brother and say, well, it's okay, it'd be wrong for me to do that. And like I said, I think I don't want to step on toes this morning. I know that there might be some that have tobacco or use tobacco, and I'm not, I just want to say this straight up.
Anything that
If it's doing harm,
you,
it ain't good. It ain't doing good. And we need to make sure that we're right. What'd you say?
anything that controls you, that is a sin.
Yeah. And
Except God.
like I said, though, I still think about dipping snuff all the time. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Like I said, it had me in such bondage for so long. I was 15 years old when I started and 30 when I stopped. And so for 15 years, and now only 3 years, even 3 years without it, I wake up sometimes having dreams of it, and I can taste the wintergreen. I can taste it. It's a temptation. It really, truly is. We've got to figure out ways to keep from going back into that. We've got to figure out ways to not do that. But instead of just saying, well, it's okay, and waving our hand at it. We can't take pleasure in sin or condoning sin, as Ms. Frieda said. We'll talk about the definition, defining the sin of adultery. We've discussed this one already, but they brought it back up, so I'm just following the curriculum here. Unlawful sex between a married person and other than his or her spouse. It's unlawful, period, point blank. If you look at the sin of David and Bathsheba, she was married. Bathsheba was married to Uriah the Hittite. She was spoken for. When David saw her, he didn't care. All of that other stuff went completely out of his mind, and he went straight to the thought of, I just want her.
David was also married.
Yes, sir. And you look at it, it's just adultery, going outside of that covenant that you've made with another person. That's sin. And then you got Eli's sons. They were wild, weren't they? Let's go to 1 Samuel. Verse 22. Now Eli was very old and heard that all of his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. They were, first and foremost, they were going against God. And what God had placed those women there at the door. These were servants at the door of the tabernacle. Would this have been virgins? Is that what these women would have been, the virgins that would have been in service to God at the tabernacle? Is that correct? And they're laying with them. They're just defiling. Not only, like I said, they're defiling the tabernacle of God, they defiled themselves in the process. They just went crazy. They're just doing whatever they wanted to do. They're living after their own lusts instead of the discipline that, God's told them to have. God's told all of us that we need to restrain ourselves, that we should have moderation, that we should have that self-control, and they're going crazy. They're absolutely going nuts. And so, like I said, it's unlawful sex outside of a covenant that you've made. If you've made a covenant, a marriage covenant's made with God. Those three. When you step, your spouse, and the Lord, that covenant, that agreement is saying that you're going to be with that person You're going to serve God with that person for the rest of your life. It has no room for another. A lot of times people explain it as the triangle, you know. You can't add another side to the triangle without it becoming a different shape. It has to stay this. Otherwise it becomes defiled. And so we have to be careful. Have to make sure that also that, you know, Matthew 19:9, when you look at that verse, the dangers, as we discussed this before, the dangers of adultery in a marriage cause difficulty for that person who was the guilty party after the fact. If it doesn't matter, if that person gets right and does all that he can do, if he's messed up, he's messed up. He or she. If they've messed up, they've messed up. We get one shot at it. And we got to do it right. We can't mess it up. All right. We've got about 3 minutes. I'm going to talk about the sin of uncleanness. Uncleanness is just the opposite of purity. You look at examples of uncleanness. We've got homosexuality. In Romans chapter 1, remember it gives us that list of all the different things that are just not okay with God and that are not good. Look at that first thing. It says the word is often associated with sensuality, unnatural lusts, uncleanness, perversions, anything that's outside of, normal. And you say, well, who defines normal? God does. God does. That's the first thing a lot of people say, well, what's your definition of normal? Everybody's definition of normal is different, because what's one thing for you is one thing. Well, now we have to look at God's definition of normal. And when he talks about, especially concerning homosexuality, when he talks about marriage and being in a relationship, it's between a man and a woman, not a man and a man or a woman and a woman. And that's just all there is to it. When we talk about homosexuality, a lot of times people get their guard up and they put their guard up. Oh, I've got friends, I've got family, and I love them. I love them too. But just like God says it's not okay for us to eat that second cupcake, he also says that there's a way in which somebody should have relations with another person. It's not about the fact that I don't love the person. It's about the fact that what's wrong is wrong, and we've got to call it that. We've got to call wrong wrong. We've got to call right right. That's it.
I always said, you don't not like that person. You don't like what he's doing. That's wrong.
Love the person and hate the sin. And, a lot of times people don't know how to separate those two, but there's an absolute separation. What better love do you have for a person than to show them that they're in the wrong? And when it comes to God, because what greater love can you have for somebody than to show them the gospel and how to make it to heaven? Then they might fight you the whole way. I'm okay. But all you're doing, metaphorically, is trying to tell them not to go over that cliff that they're about to go over. You're telling them, wait, if you keep going in this direction, it's going to end in your demise. If you keep going in this direction, it's going to mess you up. You're going to be in trouble. Well, they might fight you and they might tell you, no, I know where I'm going. I know I'm okay. And if they do, that's, some are going to. Some are going to tell you that you're wrong and they're right all the way over the cliff. But think about the individual that stops and heeds to your warning and then finds out for themselves that what you were saying, there really was a cliff at the end of that road, and there really was a situation, and that what you did was save their life. And you showed them the truth through God's word, that their life did not add up with God's word, and you wanted them to be saved, and then they're thankful. If you've ever been converted from outside the church, when you finally see the truth, that thought never leaves you. The thought of that person who shared with you the truth, it never gets less special. I'll just say it like that. The fellow that studied with me and showed me that I was sincere, but I was sincerely wrong. I never forgot that fella, because he could have just left me. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Raising your hand for daily Bible readers. But no, I could have that fella he could have just let me do what I wanted to do and live the way I wanted to live and never share the gospel with me, but instead he showed me that I was on the wrong path, and I'm thankful for it.
They say, on me.